Coming up in this episode of the All Aboard Podcast, we review 50 Years of Amtrak Trains by David Warner and Bruce Goldberg. Have your tickets out of the envelope. Get ready for a great ride. All aboard, please. Now boarding on track number 8 is train number 1, the All Aboard Podcast, your twice weekly excursion into transportation excellence, and I am your conductor, Phil Bell, Enterprise B, PB Crisp, Mr. 645, a highly trained rail enthusiast who is 98% closer to becoming a highly trained broadcast specialist. And for the third time this week, that's right, third time, I'm blessed to be back behind this, the Brunswick Green PLB microphone. And let's not forget, I am, as always, the E. Hunter Harrison Chair holder here at the Bell Institute for Advanced Railroad Studies, where there are no degrees because the learning never ceases. And this week has been a lot of fun because it is Passenger Train Week. And in Passenger Train Week, of course, celebrating Amtrak's 53rd birthday, I wanted to make sure that we had a chance to chat about 50 Years of Amtrak Trains, which is one of my favorite books, the best $70+ that I've ever spent, and you would do well to do the same. But before we get going, I want to say something that was really interesting. Yesterday, as I was going about my day, I saw that Kalmbach Media had sold the majority of its titles. In fact, we're talking about trains, model railroader, classic trains, classic toy trains, you name it, sold them to a company that is related to freight waves, and this is Fire Crown Media. And so this is a big change because if you're like me, most of us grew up in some form or another with the Kalmbach magazines. Even though we never knew who Al Kalmbach was or anything like that, we certainly felt his influence. That's what led to David P. Morgan. That's what led to so much knowledge being diffused all over the place about what railroads are, how they work, you name it, how to build your own model railroad. It was amazing. And so I wish the new company, Fire Crown Media, the best. In fact, I've been really excited about a lot of what they do, as they're the people behind Freight Waves. And so I'm looking forward to a great new era for those magazines. And so what I want you to do is, of course, your number one place to get railroad news should be, as always, All Things Trains, but also make sure to patronize some of the others as well. And the reason why I'm telling you to do that is the more and more out there that there are, that means the more knowledge will be diffused, and the more knowledge that will be diffused, the more we will be able to enjoy this hobby. If you're a rail enthusiast, if you're a investor, to understand how the railroads work and how they make their money and when to know if things are going wrong. If you're an employee, to have a place to talk about it outside of the companies themselves. And if you're a policymaker, to understand what railroads are providing to the community. So it's important that those magazines and enterprises succeed, as well as this one. So subscribe here, subscribe there, and keep watch out, because we will be launching a new Patreon page and a few other things in the coming days where I want you to be a part of it. Now, let's get to 50 Years of Amtrak Trains. Why are we talking about this? Well, here's the story. I was at one of the train shows in Timonium a few months ago. And as you know, we do this podcast, but we also help to support the company by selling memorabilia. And I had a table there, and we were, as usual, having a little bit of a tough time because when you're a vendor at these shows, it always feels like you're having a tough time. But there were two guys there that looked just a little out of place. And I said, well, they don't look like the grizzled veterans of the train shows, because if you've been to a train show and you see the vendors there, they're very nice people, but they definitely have an air about them because they know they're here for business, even if they love model trains or rail memorabilia or otherwise. But these guys really stood out. So I went over, just wanted to see what they had, because they had some nice looking books. And this is what I saw. Right here, for those of you on CP5 cam, here's the book. It's very thick. It's very heavy. It's very long. It's very much a coffee table type book. And, I talked to David Warner first, and he said, you really should buy the book. And I was kind of like, I don't know if I want to spend $70 because, sales hadn't gone well that day, and I had just spent a lot of money in general, really, went crazy at Wawa. But at the end of the show, I said, you know what, I'm going to do this. I love trains, and this looks like a great book. And these guys look like they know what they're talking about. Plus, one of them had a shirt that had the Amtrak Cascades logo on it. Well, it turns out David Warner and Bruce Goldberg were both veterans of Amtrak. They were from inside the company. And so a lot of what is in the book is knowledge that they have directly because they were there. And as I went through it, it was just amazing. Now, I want to be clear. This is not your typical railfan book, because most railfan books have this mix of commentary plus historical digression and so forth. A lot of what you'll get with me, which gives it a certain character, and the character is very good, but it's also something that we've come to rely on in the books that we read in the magazines. This is very, very, how should I say it, very down the middle. It is simply telling you what the trains are, when they ran, what the causes were in some cases, if they can be verified, about why those changes were made, what markets they were serving, and so on. This gives you that information from not only the day Amtrak started, May 1st, 1971, but even before that. So what you will find are schedules of the last train to operate on a particular route before Amtrak took over, if that was before Amtrak Day. And in other cases, you'll have a little bit of a description about what the preceding railroads were doing. One example is one of the favorite trains that I wish I'd gotten to ride, the Floridian, which was running from Chicago to Miami and St. Petersburg. This correctly notes that before Amtrak took over, the preceding train, which was the Pennsylvania Railroad's South Wind, actually wasn't even the Pennsylvania Railroad's South Wind anymore, because Penn Central, Pennsylvania's successor, had broken the connection at Louisville and was operating an unnamed train from Chicago to Louisville because they were legally required to do so. But the other railroads that were partners in it, the Louisville and Nashville, and by that point the Seaboard Coast Line, were operating another train, which was the South Wind, between Louisville and Florida. So that very, very correct notation is what makes this so interesting, because now you can see how the schedules evolved, how the trains evolved, and it's really exciting. Another thing that I really liked was this. This was a page of notes, actually 2 pages of notes, that talk about corrections and so on that came with the book, and that shows the commitment of the authors to making this really a quality publication. Now, there are some things to warn you about. Number one, it's pricey. So make sure to have your money out. Now, I know some of you are saying, well, I've paid $200, $300 for books. This is worth it. It is worth every nickel. If you have the ability to buy it, which you can get it on Amazon, you can get it on the Kalmbach Publishing site. Pretty soon you'll be able to get it on All Things Trains by next week. Go ahead and do that. Buy it today. And I'll give you an example as to why. If you go over here on CP5 Cam, I want to make sure that you can see this. They're selling it on eBay for over $143, so close to $150 probably when you get the shipping and whatnot put in there. But the other thing I wanted to show you in adding this is the quality of photography that is in this. You will be absolutely mesmerized by the pictures that you see here, because it is a little bit of everything. You have the beautiful E-units, which are my favorite, all over the place. You see them in variety of ways, whether we're talking about in Penn Central paint looking raggedy, whether we're talking about Seaboard Coastline paint, or a variety of different Amtrak schemes. You'll see things like a Western Maryland streamlined coach behind a Chesapeake and Ohio Dome car with a GP9 pulling it as part of the James Whitcomb Riley. You'll see almost every phase of the Southwest Chief, which was the Super Chief. You'll even see the Chief, which was run for a few months in 1972 along with the Super Chief. You'll see the Southwest Limited, all of that, and an explanation as to why. Now, what are the drawbacks? First of all, because there's so much information here that's related to how the trains run and what actually happened there, there's not a lot of information related to what the root causes were behind all of the decisions. So, for example, one thing I would love to know about is when the Santa Fe, Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, under President John Reed, pulled Amtrak's ability to use the name Chief from which was the Texas Chief and the Super Chief on the 2 trains that Amtrak had taken over from them, or 2 of the trains they'd taken over. What was the cause? What went through their heads? How did that happen? Was that a dispute between Amtrak management and Santa Fe management? Or was it something like a Santa Fe official or a few rode Amtrak's trains at the time and said, man, this is terrible, and the railroad said, we don't want you to do that? Was it a copyright issue? Now, this is something that they may not know. This is something that may even be lost to history because, as we know, a lot of these decisions and conversations and whatnot, if they're not written down once people pass away or just simply decide not to say anything, may not necessarily be known. But that would be nice. Now, I don't fault them for not including that information there because it is very comprehensive, but I just want to warn you about what you're going to see there. Another thing that's interesting is you will see a lot of the same text over and over again in some cases where they're talking about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on Amtrak operations and so on. However, I actually look at this as being a positive because it helps you understand and see the rationale that people at Amtrak inside the company are using as they're making decisions and the way things work. So this is not only an insight into how the trains ran, but how the people who operate and are responsible for putting on the trains see things. The one thing I want to add here at the conclusion of the book review portion of this is that it made me very sad. And I hope that if David and Bruce see this, you take this the right way. As you go through the book, you can see the evolution of many of the trains. For example, you see the Texas Chief, the picture of the first Amtrak Texas Chief departing Chicago Union Station on May 1st, 1971. Now, that's noteworthy because, of course, the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, they ran out of Dearborn Station. But when Amtrak took over, they started the process of trying to move all of the trains over to Union Station. And that meant on Amtrak Day, there were now only 2 stations in Chicago that were being served by intercity passenger trains, Chicago Union Station and Illinois Central Station. Now, some of the others, Dearborn did continue to see trains in the form of the N&W's commuter service to Orland Park, Illinois, which was former Wabash, as well as Chicago Northwestern's passenger station continued to see plenty of trains, which it still does today, even though the building is no longer there, that went up to a variety of locations up to the north and west of the city of Chicago, as well as LaSalle Street, which was the terminal for the Rock Island and the New York Central, continue to see commuter trains operated by the Rock Island after Penn Central services, of course, ceased going there. However, you see this beautiful train, clean, Santa Fe, pulled by the F7s with the bi-levels, everything that you might expect out of what was called the Texas Chief, what you would have expected to see by the AT&SF a day earlier. But then as time goes on, you see how the train became a little bit more ratty looking. The car types got to be a lot more jumbled, and the locomotives certainly weren't clean. And then it's gone. And so as you see this, you start to understand that no matter what the debates are about funding, no matter what the debates are about the quality of the service, what the trains are named, what kind of engines are pulling them, what kind of cars there are, it may not be here forever. And I stressed this in the last video that we did. We talked about Amtrak trains that are not running. But I want to make sure that each of you understand, take as much time as you can to ride these trains. If sometimes the service isn't great, you don't have to praise it, but I hope you'll take it, because we may be in the last generation. You know, as I looked at some of the other pictures, some of the newer ones, the Southwest Chief, for example, as it currently exists, when you're seeing these pictures of the Genesis units and the relatively short Superliner consists, right next to the text that's describing the effort that Amtrak undertook in 2018 to potentially break the Southwest Chief in the middle and have a bus bridge between one portion of the train to the east and another portion of the train to the west, you realize, you know what? It may not always be long for this world. So I hope you'll get out and do that. And I hope that you will also, and this is critical, in the forums that you post in, including the ChatGP50 forums at allthingstrains.com, in the conversations that you have with your friends, with your fellow rail enthusiasts, with your fellow employees, with members of elected officials and so forth, I hope that you'll stress how much that you think passenger rail is important. And I hope you'll be open to new ways to innovate in passenger rail. Now, I don't expect E8s and streamlined cars and so forth to dominate for decades to come. But what I do expect to happen is that if we as enthusiasts and lovers of passenger trains keep an open mind, then we will have in 20 years a book that's even bigger, not only to talk about what Amtrak trains are, but to talk about the growth of passenger rail. That's what I hope to see, and I hope you want to see it as well. So we'll be back with you on Monday to talk about some new things on the All Aboard podcast. So I hope you'll tune in at 12:05 p.m. And as always, like, share, subscribe. As we like to say, stop, look, and listen. We'll see you down the main line, and I hope you have a great day.